Hi everyone, welcome to Got Therapy. I'm Michael Baltimore. It's the Dan Rose Show, and this is Dan Rose, straight from the Counseling Center here at Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia. And from Appalachia. We talked about that. You said you were born in Tennessee,
East
in
Tennessee.
a small town. All right, tell us about your history.
I'm an Appalachian with an education, as I like to say.
Okay, that's good. That's not a slur.
I can talk about my people.
Yes, come on.
It's not a slur if, you know,
You're from there. You can talk about it, right? Okay, good.
Actually, right. The Appalachians have minority status. They're actually,
okay.
you know.
Okay.
It's a people.
I don't know where to go with that, but that's your history. So you came from Tennessee, and you're in Georgia now. How did you get from Tennessee to Georgia? What happened?
Witness protection.
Okay, see, I set him up, he knocks him down. This is how Henny Youngman kind of
And by the way,
here.
no one is. I mean, this weekend, no one watches the show, so I'm still protected.
You are. That is very true. But one day this will be in syndication, and we're going to get. So we were talking. I was thinking. I had this conversation with James, who's been James Fordham, ladies and gentlemen, who's running our operation here, doing a great job keeping us up and going and recording, moving cameras around. Talking about the notion that in this show there are those moments of wisdom where people are really learning about their lives and how to operate in the world and what's behind the scene, you may say, in their relationships. And we've talked about wellness, we talked about mindfulness, we've talked about all these psychological concepts that help us understand what happens in our relationships. And we want to pull those out of this show because there's a lot of things that are not that. Kind of
like my recipe for potted meat.
Yes, like
that.
See, I was asking you not to bring that up, but at least you didn't say the word. You didn't say the words. Okay, see, that's what, ladies and gentlemen, we get in trouble every time with this. There are those moments, though, that are going to be helpful to you, and I love those moments when you kind of bring it. You bring it.
Our topic today.
Okay, go.
How to turn an emotional experience into a mental event.
Yes. Now,
that is one of the things that can happen, particularly with psychotherapy. Outcome research shows the capacity for the observation and generation of mental events.
Right, because if you stay in that emotional field, you might be in trouble. There's an audience listening to us behind the scenes over there. Probably won't pick up that on camera, but to be in the emotional field and stay there. So you're saying take that emotion, move it into a mental event.
Here's an example from my very life.
Okay, go.
Okay. My wife comes in, and I've come in from a long day of work. Come in 7:30. Okay. I've worked, done a lot of things. I come home, my son's there to meet me when I at the door. We play, and I'm sitting down to eat, and she tells me, she says, you know what? I really appreciate it if you pick up more around the house. There are a lot. Look, nobody has been taking the recycle out. It just piles up and piles up. Okay, now. That generates.
You have an opportunity there, is what you're telling me, right there.
Her statement, and we encounter these statements all the time, generate what we call an emergent process.
All right.
So what happened is, suddenly I'm experiencing some visceral experience, right?
Right.
Something is happening in me, right?
Sure.
So.
You've had a long day at work. Right. A lot of things maybe pin up. You work through some issues. You're tired. You're frustrated. You just want to relax. You couldn't wait to get home to relax, and she says these things, bringing those things up to you. Yes.
So it generates, things start happening, right?
Sure, they do.
Firing. And what happens is, and you can often experience this, like at that moment, before I even can begin to think, I begin to feel my face becoming flushed, my heart beating a little harder,
right?
And maybe even starting to sweat. So you begin to get these visceral responses.
So this is a physical response to what was said to you, right?
Subcortical physical experiences, and in a way, they are met by the top-down process of the cortex. So there's this emergence, and there is the recurrence. So they meet. And so what happens is these things are then interpreted and made use of in that moment. And what often happens, and happened in this event.
Okay, all right, there you go.
Because I shot my wife.
Okay, no, I was thinking.
I didn't.
But no, you had an emotional reaction.
And I said something like, look, I have worked all day. What time did you get home today? I got home at 7:30. So at that moment, I get angry.
Yes.
Boom. So it was an emotional event. The things she said to me, what happened to me, and how I chose to respond Right. My executive functioning was minimal at that point, and I responded in a primitive cortical limbic fight or flight, in this case fight.
Right.
Boom.
Made the decision.
And it was almost a reflexive action. Right. So at that moment, that is an example of a non-mental event.
Well, that actually sounds like something that we do day to day.
Right.
I mean, and it could be. So, I mean, everybody experiences those things. And sometimes I think we just stay with that emotion and we build the fight. The fight starts happening. And that's not a good place to be, especially with someone you love in the relationship. You don't want to carry that
because
further.
More than likely, she herself was engaged in a non-mental event. She had been irritated about this. She may have been irritated that I'd been gone all day. She had been home with our son and whatnot. And so,
you're talking about how you, on earlier shows, it's not just you. It's also that you are connected in that relationship, so that it's more than just your individual processing of information.
There's no such thing as a jerk in isolation. It
right.
takes two people to make a jerk. Keep that in mind. So
I never heard it put exactly like that, but I understand what you're saying.
When I moved into jerkdom, it took two.
Yep.
So
tendency is for the other person to join you in that.
Right. In fact, in some ways, she was in a non-mental space, and therefore I joined her in a non-mental space, and as a result, there was a moment of dysregulation. In couples therapy, I would say that one of the things you can say about a couple is it's not so much that couples shouldn't argue, but after an argument, how do they regulate themselves? How do they return back? So it's often that recovery that's actually the most important part of
very important part of that dysregulation.
So, but at that moment, pow. So, if you rewind it, how do you find a way to be able to, in a space like that, either before, during, or after, to be able to generate a mental event? And what can happen in particularly people who are in some long-term therapy, or we've mentioned mindfulness, people who practice mindfulness and mentalization practices, they are often able to observe themselves when it's happening. So for instance, if I were in a slightly better state, and my wife began to say that, I could mentalize her, and I would be objective. If this were a mental event, I would be able to observe it on some way. I would be able to maintain some distance from it, a self-reflective function, they say in my end of the biz.
Self-reflective function. So otherwise, if you didn't, you just become immersed into that affect and emotion. And it seems to me that there's some other theories. We talked about attachment and object relations and some other kinds of things in here before, that it might be that connects with older feelings, things that have happened in your past, attachment wounds, the other kinds of things that happen.
Yeah, the reflexive action, the sort of the non-reflective acting that I do is usually based on older relationships. We would say they're internalized, or that there's a neuronal circuit that sort of, we literally, there are grooves in us that sort of answer those moments reflexively.
And I guess there were pathways, like brain pathways, that people talk about.
There's some interesting studies with functional MRIs where they've been able to sort of isolate some of these pathways. So in psychological literature, we talk about internalization, but now we're beginning to actually find them, to localize them in brain structure, which I think is really interesting. But
so it's easy to go back in there. The pathways are already there in our brains, and so you get hurt or angry or have that emotional moment, and then it connects with the others. And so you may feel wounded, you may feel hurt, you want to strike back, and the argument continues to go. But we need to interrupt that process.
And what can happen, and like for instance, if you're working with someone in therapy who has some strong trauma, some sexual trauma, whatever the trauma might be, oftentimes that they live in a world that is ruled by this reflex, that they are often hypervigilant, they're easily triggered into these emergent states, and so they lose the capacity to be able to experience the world around them as a mental event. Their self-reflective function sort of collapses rather quickly. They're unable to sort of mediate or modulate the feelings they have. They get into this hypervigilant, hyper-scared fight-or-flight response, and they act reflexively. So one of the things you do in therapy is, so over time, you get them to be able to think, to literally insert a thought in between what they feel and how they act. And so in some ways, you're attempting to get them, if we go back to the example of me, and you sort of, when you were talking, there's several parts to this, because there is the past that is answering the present, And we want to generate a me, an observing me, that can sort of observe both those processes. So you might be able to say to yourself, if I could rewind it, she comes and starts talking to me. I begin to feel this. I can answer it by saying, if I'm in this mindful state, I take a breath, I allow myself a chance to sort of check in.
You've talked about that before, about taking that breath that we don't often do, but we need to do it.
Vital, because that breath literally, it energizes and makes the possibility through oxygenation of higher cortical functioning. It does a lot of things.
Okay.
But in that moment, I can take a breath and I can say, just ask myself, what am I feeling? And I can say, I'm tired. It's been a long day. I haven't had a chance to relax, and so I'm not really able to meet my wife at the place that she's at. I might then be able, I've leaned into myself, I might be able to lean into her and say, she's had a long day too. I can tell by the tone of her voice. She's in a tense place. I might even feel that pull, that reflexive pull, to be able to act in old ways. You know, I really am feeling irritated now. I could really just let her have it. You know, how hard have I been working? I worked more hours than she did today. I can move to that place. I can move to that sort of those dance that couples do. But if I can allow myself to be aware of all of those things in some form or fashion, I might be able to fashion a different response, first for myself. And one of my favorite images for this is if you slow it down. Okay. If you're in an airplane and the oxygen is
mask has come down.
The masks come down, right?
Okay.
The first thing you do is put it on yourself before you put it on the person next to you. So your first intervention is usually for yourself. And notice how I was able to sort of, in a way, soothe myself. I'm tired. This is what's going on with me. I'm not into her, what's going on with her. I become aware of these old patterns that are being kicked in. And then I might be able to fashion a different response. I might be able to say, hey, it could be as simple as, hey, you know, I know you're upset and whatnot. Can I let me finish this and let's talk about a way to fix that. Or I might be able to simply sit there and listen.
It'd be hard to do for some people, but it sounds like a great way to do it.
You could just nod and smile and say, okay, okay, yeah. And once she vents, she may be in a different space. It may be a time then, you may even be able to, there may be even a productive argument to be had, a way to be able to still hold on to some of the feelings that you have in a way to bring them into a space that both of you can talk about. Like, look, I know we're both tired, and there's some things that I'm not doing, and there's some things that maybe you're not doing. You know, there could be a way. That last one's a little more difficult.
Right, absolutely.
But I think the point is, we have in some way turned an emotional experience, positive or negative, into an event, a mental event that you can do something with. So as opposed to it being reflexive and done to you, you suddenly have the capacity to be able to both participant and observer in a moment, in the here and now. And it gives you the possibility of generating lots of responses from the simple to the complex. And one of the things I like about this idea is that it generates a coherent complexity. This is a notion that some of the interpersonal neurobiologists like Dan Siegel talk about, and I like the idea of this, of a coherent complexity. We often think that if something gets more complex, then it's going to, it's going to sag under its own weight. But if you can generate and maintain a coherent complexity, you can begin to see all sorts of sides of things. Yourself, the person in front of you, and that's something.
It gives you more options to deal with, besides just this sort of reactive in those neural pathways that have been so ingrained and reinforced that you want to come back, you want to strike back. You're hurt, and so you try to strike back. But if you take that breath, that's a very interesting idea to kind of
and there's a famous
things
quote,
go better, maybe.
All roads lead back to Freud, as you know.
Yes, I've heard that from you.
It's a fact. There's a famous statement by Freud where he says, the goal of therapy is where it was, there I shall be, or where it was, there I shall be becoming. And when we are in an it state, we are literally, that is a non-thinking, there is no participant observer. We are simply participant. We have fallen into and we are lost in the moment. And that's a wonderful place to be if you're kissing someone, or if you're at a Lil Wayne concert, or I mean, at those moments, you want the capacity to lose yourself.
I don't know how Lil Wayne got in this conversation, but all right, let me.
By the way, all roads lead back to Lil Wayne.
Yeah, I've heard that one too. But
you pronounce it Lil Wayne or Lil Wayne?
Lil Wayne.
Lil Wayne.
Lil Wayne. But all right, let me go back though, because this notion was, you gave us a great illustration. You used that with your wife Julie, who's a wonderful person, and you guys are a great couple.
How do you know?
She's told me when
that she's told you she's a wonderful person. She's conceded.
She told me about no. So what I was going with, but all right, you two are very smart, intellectual people. You can kind of weigh those things and make good use of the psychological piece in moving into a mental experience. What about the person? I'll give you a what if scenario. But all right, you take that breath. You are moving this into a mental experience. The other person is not. They are keeping going. So you may reflect something to them, but they're still in that emotional space. They are lashing out. They're wanting to hurt you. And sometimes that happens, that the person is not willing to do it. You may be willing to do it. The other person is not willing to take that breath because they're angry and they want to punish or they want to move forward on you. What do you do?
Certainly, the last thing you want to do is suddenly start saying things about their mother.
Okay.
That's
not the answer I was looking for, but
that might be the impetus. Right. I think that there's a lecture I give, and the title is "Don't Catch the Crazy," and you have the capacity. These sorts of crazy is contagious. When someone is in a non-mediated or modulated affect state, you can catch it. It happens. I mean,
right.
I think that even if you are unable to in any way alter the course of their emotional experience, your capacity to stay centered in yourself is certainly a worthwhile goal to have.
Right.
However, and this often happens in therapy, and I do a lot of long-term work with folks who have some real strong and sustained emotional storms.
Sure.
And your capacities to stay centered is also catching. Being in the presence of someone who is not a sort of annoying sanguine state, but someone who is you can tell is trying to stay with you, trying to be present, trying to hold you and to stay connected in the face of what you're experiencing, is something that you are literally building new neuronal pathways, because the person in front of you is losing it has probably seldom been in the presence of someone who's been able to stay connected with them when they're in that state, and quite possibly has never really had someone stay connected with them when they were at their key developmental points. Mom, dad, whoever their caretaker may have been, hasn't been present with them in such a way that they could build those networks, that they could internalize that.
Right.
And in therapy, what you often do is sort of it's pejorative to say a reparenting, but a re-experiencing in a way that can help someone to be able to think about themselves in ways that they weren't able, that someone didn't think about them in when they were younger. You hold them in mind in a way that they weren't held in mind, maybe in moments when they should have.
Right. Okay. That's the job of the therapist. Maybe we all need to take a lesson from the therapist, and maybe that contagion goes both ways. So maybe our mindfulness kind of move toward the other person. All right. That's a great answer, by the way. I wasn't expecting that. I was thinking a little bit more of Lil Wayne.
And, you were thinking about potty meat.
I was thinking of potty meat because of what you said before the show, but we can't use that here on this show. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching GotTherapy, the Dan Rose Show here at Columbus State University, and it's always my pleasure to have Dan in the studio. And I think
and also I have a Halloween party this Saturday.
Yeah, are you inviting people from
the? Come.
Okay.
And you said you were going to come.
I'm coming.
James said he was coming.
Yeah, James is there.
So you're going to be there, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely on video.
Yeah, I'm being there.
So the next time we hang out, we'll see.
Okay, this is going to come back to haunt me. So, are you videotaping this party? We'll get to see clips from the party.
You don't want to go? You know my costume? Ask me what my costume's going to be.
I heard your answer before. I'm not willing to ask that. All right. So, what's your costume?
Medical waste. I'm going to go with medical waste. It's pertinent. It'll start a conversation and a dialogue.
That yellow sticker with the hazardous waste thing. Oh boy, have we gotten to a new point in this show. This would have been a good show, ladies and gentlemen. Fast forward through this section, but go back and listen to the other section. Hey, it's our pleasure to be here, and we're glad you're watching. We'll see you next time right here on Got Therapy.